Good morning. Lord's blessed us for another day. It's good to be here. Good to be back as well. No, Kathy and I were out last week to the polishing the pulpit workshop, or some call it the union meeting, but that's not a lot of union meeting going on up there. A lot of other stuff going on. But it's good to be back. So we'll appreciate Glenn and Bert filling in for me Sunday and Wednesday night while we were out. So good to be back. We're on page 9 of the book, page 9. We'll begin the word of prayer. And John Matthews, would you lead some prayer, please? Well, the topic of the lesson is stewards, good and bad. I guess it sort of comes down to how are we using what God has blessed us with. And that could range from many different aspects. It could be monetary ways that God has blessed us. How are we using that? It could be our talents. God has blessed each of us with talents. And how are we using that? Or it could be just everyday blessings that God has given to us. How are we using those everyday blessings? And in the scripture there, Matthew 25, 31 through 46, we find here that those who were blessed by God, some of them used their blessing and in the proper way, and there were some that did not use their blessings in a proper way. And because of my voice, sort of scratchy this morning, it's going to be on the screen, but I'm not going to read through it. It's there as to what took place from these Matthew 25, 31. And that's where he is. Matthew 25 is about the judgment. And dividing the saved from the unsaved, the sheep from the goats. And if you notice there around verse, 34. Then the king will say of those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Here these individuals, they are using their talents. They're being good stewards of what God has given to them. And that's why they were going out and helping the sick. They were visiting the sick. Those that were in prison, helping to feed folks, doing all these things. And God blessed them with this. And therefore they were using it. And of course they asked the question, well, Lord, when did we do this? We didn't see you there. And of course he says when you were doing it to any of these, helping people, well, that's when you were doing it for me. And of course he goes on to the next group. And there he talks about on the left hand, and like in verse 41, "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels." And of course, he goes through the same deal here. "I was hungry, you gave me no food. Thirsty, no drink. I was a stranger, you didn't take me in. You didn't clothe me, you didn't visit with me." And there he is condemning them because they didn't use the blessings. They weren't good stewards of what God had given to them. So, and therefore they were on the side of the punishment, the goats there, and how they were not using this gift. Well, does this mean that in order to be saved, all I got to do is use my blessings toward others? Well, no. That's not part of the plan of salvation, but it's part of our Christian living, how we use the blessings God has given to us. So it's not becoming a Christian, but it's the fruits of a Christian. Here's how a Christian lives. So the good steward, all these things, and sometimes we fail to realize that our food is a blessing from God. The very water we drink, clean water, a blessing from God. Our clothing, our health, our just freedom in general, all these are blessings from God. And we need to use these. So here we find two groups, the sheep and the goats. One understood the blessings and used them properly, and one did not. And it cost them their salvation. So it very well could be that this is could be a salvation issue of how we use our blessings. Are we good stewards of what God has given to us? Well, question number one, who are the stewards of God today? Well, the verse there, 1 Peter 4:10, as each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. A steward is someone that has been given something, and it's up to that individual to properly use it. So we are all stewards of God today. You think of all the blessings He's given to us. We've all received gifts from God. And how are we using these? Is it just for myself? Am I very self-centered with God's blessings? Or am I being a blessing to others? Which one? So how I use this makes a difference. So we're all stewards. God has given us these blessings. How are we using them? Hopefully in the right way. So each one, he says in 1 Peter 4:10, has received a gift. Each one of us has. Question number 2. For whose things are stewards caring? And there's Psalms 24 and verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. So everything belongs to God. They are His blessings, which He has carried to us. Give me some water. So since all things belong to God, He has given us these things as a loan. And we are to, again, use them in the right way. So all that we have is simply borrowed from God. And use it right. Has somebody ever borrowed something from you and they don't take care of it? And they return it and it's broken? And they don't tell you about it until the next time you get ready to use it and it's broken? Wouldn't you have preferred for them to tell you up front? Well, I broke it here, and well, that's okay. I know about it. I can get it fixed. But sometimes it'll happen. Question number 3. List 2 types of stewards. Well, we already looked at 1 Peter 4:10, and we looked at Matthew 25. And you have a good steward and you have a bad steward. Those who use what God's given properly and those who do not. So that's a pretty easy question for that one to be answered. Question number 4. Was the woman who anointed Jesus a good steward of this ointment? If you remember what this lady, she comes to Christ. She has some very expensive perfume. And she puts it on Christ's head. And it really smelled up the room in a very good way. And the disciples, at least one of them, thinks this is a waste. Why don't we take this perfume and sell it so that we can give the money to the poor. Of course, Judas had no intention of doing that. So here's this lady, and Christ responds to the disciples in Matthew 26 and verse 10. He says there, but when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. And I like the way Mark says it. Mark says it, I think, a little better. Mark 14 verse 8. He says, she has done what she could. And she has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. She has done what she could. She could only do one thing. And she had this perfume, and she did that which was right with this perfume. If they had taken this perfume away from her and sold it and given the money to the poor, it would have robbed her of her enjoyment of giving. It would have taken that away from her. And you don't want to do that. A person who has one talent, and they're doing what they can, you don't want to take that talent away from that person, because it very well could destroy them, and from a spiritual standpoint. Don't want to do that. And I've known of members, and we've had some members here, that had one talent, and they used it. And I think back to some individuals, they've gone on to get the reward. But remember Harold Galt? He had one talent. And that was to bring tons of chocolate and distribute among everybody. And he also, many times, he would unlock the doors in the mornings and do other little bitty things. And what would have happened? He would have taken that talent away from him. It would hurt him. I think of another one. Hubert Oaks. Remember Hubert? Hubert as well. He would come, you could set your watch by him. He'd show up, he'd put the cards out and the pencils and whatever else he could do, but that's all he could do. So, again, as Christ says of this woman here, this is all she could do. Well, that's enough. She used that one talent. She used her blessing that God gave to her to have this perfume, a very costly perfume. So we might be thinking, well, that perfume could have been sold and used in a better way. Well, what would it have done to this woman? It could have destroyed her. Thinking, well, he just don't care anything about what I have here, my offering to him. So let's remember that for those who have just that one talent. It's good for them to use it. Question number 6. What did the fear of making a bad investment cause one steward to do? Well, there in Matthew 25, verse 18, I guess it's the man who had the one talent. And what did he do? But he who had received one went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. Fear caused him to do nothing, to do absolutely nothing. And that's what fear will do. It can cause a person to do nothing. They're so scared, I might say the wrong thing, or I might make a mistake, and therefore they won't use their talent. And that's a shame, because everybody that has a talent is going to do something wrong at some point, trying to use it properly. You're going to say something in the wrong way at some point. All that's going to happen. Get used to it. But it's amazing sometimes how they will use that talent at work, but they won't use it at church. Why not use it there as equal? Why not do that? But here, this one man, he wouldn't use his talent, and the Lord takes it away from him and gives it to the one who had doubled his own, the 5-talent man. So let's not have a fear when it comes to using our talent. Do the best we can do, learn from our mistake, and then go on to something else and use it. Question number 7. How did a rich young ruler fall or fail in his stewardship? We know his story, which is told there in Luke 18. He comes to Christ. What good thing must I do? And Christ tells him, gives him a list of things there. I kept these from my youth up. And then Christ said to him, one thing you still lack. Now sell what you have, give to the poor, and follow me. But he wouldn't do that. He left in a very sorrowful way. What he failed to realize is who gave him that ability to have that wealth, who gave him the ability to earn a living and to acquire such wealth. He forgot about that. He's the one that should have been realized that at the very beginning and give and help others with it, but he was a little bit greedy with that. It's Ephesians 4 and verse 28. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. He didn't think about giving to the person who has need. He didn't think about that. He was thinking about padding his own pockets and forget about the others. And that's where his mistake came. He was more in love with his money than how he could use that money to help out of others. So our blessings are to be shared. Again, that's Ephesians 4:28 tells us that. Get out here and work so we can help those who have a need as well. Question number 8. What is really the problem the bad steward has? 1 John 3, verse 17. For whosoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? Well, it doesn't abide in him. We're to bear one another's burdens. We're told that in Galatians 6 and verse 2. If we use our blessings to help others, then we have fulfilled the law of Christ. Use our blessings. That's where a good steward is going with this. Use our blessings that God has given to bless others with. Question number 9. What is a common sin of the bad steward? This is Acts 5. Of course, that's Ananias and Sapphira. They had greed. They were covetous individuals. And that's the common sin that they had. And sometimes as a steward, what God has given to us, we'll be greedy with it as well. And we want to covet what he's given to us and not share it with others. So that's where they made their mistake, even though they gave a part of it. But they also lied about it. But greed was behind that part of being liars. That's where greed came from. Number 10. What are the marks of a faithful and wise steward? Luke 12:42. And the Lord said, who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his master will make ruler over his household, to give them the portion of food in due season? Blessed is that steward whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Well, the wise steward does as his master tells him, and he does his very best. And that's the wise steward, the wise one, not the bad one. Does what the master says and does his very best at it. Question 11. What did Peter teach us about the scope of stewardship? Acts 3 and verse 6. Peter said, silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. Peter gave the man what he needed. He didn't need silver and gold. This man needed to get up and begin to walk and to begin to earn his own living. And that's what Peter gave to him, that miracle of healing. This didn't have anything to do with salvation, but this is what an individual needed, this man, and Peter gave it to him. Sometimes you can't help individuals because what you offer to them, they don't want. They have their mind already made up. Here's what I want. And you give them a suggestion, they don't want that. There are some folks you just can't help. But this man here, Peter gave him what he really needed. And Romans 1 and verse 14 says, I'm a debtor both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to unwise. Now what Paul is speaking of here, he was a debtor. He owed these Greeks and these barbarians things, and what he owed them was the gospel. He had become a Christian because of the grace of God. Peter was here, Paul. So he said, I owe it to you to pass it on to you. It's nothing, I don't keep it to myself. And when we become Christians, it's not something that we keep to ourselves. And we need to let others know about this and do what we can. We are a debtor to these individuals. We owe them this. And so we are stewards of salvation in some ways. And we have been given a wonderful gift, and we are to pass it on and don't keep it to ourselves. That's what we are to do. So just don't make that mistake of keeping salvation to ourselves. Well, I got it. I don't care about anybody else. We need to be sharing that. God has given it to us as a blessing. Question number 12. Show that the prosperous farmer did not understand his stewardship. This is the parable of the rich farmer, I guess we'd say, or the foolish farmer. In that parable, read there in Luke 12, 16 through 20, in 4 short verses, 13 times he speaks of himself. He said, I did this or I did that. Here's what I'm going to do. He was caught up in himself, and it cost him. It cost him his life. So we've got to be careful when we talk about our blessings. Remember that who they came from, who sent them. It was God. Now let's be careful saying, I did this and I did that. And here's what I'm going to do with them. Be careful with that. This man, it cost him a great amount. And course number 13, how would you define a bad steward? Well, he doesn't use wisely what God has given to him. That's a pretty simple explanation. And course number 14 as well, how do you define a good steward? He uses wisely what God has given to him. And he realizes God has done that very thing. Has given it to him. So there's the difference in the wise and the unwise, bad and the good. Understanding where the blessings come from and doing the right thing with them. Question for the classroom, part 1, number 1. Are all bad stewards mentioned in the Bible bad people? Well, no, they're not bad people. You think of the Ananias and Sapphira, they were not bad people. They were Christians, not bad. But they let the greed and the covetousness get the most of them and cause them to lie. So they weren't bad people. And the other individuals in the scriptures as well. The rich young ruler, he wasn't a bad man. Now, how many would like to have his qualifications? He didn't do this and this and this and this. He kept all the law. At least to his eyesight, he thought he was doing it all right. But he was a good man. So just because a person doesn't use their blessings accordingly doesn't make them a bad person. So this needs a little better understanding of where they come from and how they use them. One could give generously but fail to understand where it came from. I'm giving this amount because what I have earned. Be careful. It's what God has blessed you with. Number 2 is leaving money for the Lord's work in your will, good stewardship. Well, I would say yes, it would be a good stewardship because your money can be working in a place of your absence. You're not going to be around. And that money could continue to work and do great things in your absence while you're gone. You're not going to need it. You can't carry it with you. So, can we say that we've all been blessed by the church? I would hope that we say yes. We've all been blessed by being a part of the Lord's church. So I need to, as a Christian, give back to it. Why not? We say, well, I got my children, I'm going to leave all this too, here and there. Well, that'd be fine, but why not include the church in it as well? Has the church blessed your children anyway? So it's a good thing. And I know of individuals who have done that, former members of this congregation going back probably 50 years or greater who did that very thing. And we were blessed because of what they did. And number 3, what evidence do we see today of the existence of a good steward? Well, just look at ourselves. We need to count our blessings. And we sing the song, count your many blessings one by one. If we'll do that, then we'll see a vast amount of blessings that God has given to us. A vast amount. And hopefully we'll use them properly, not misuse them in any way, so there will be a blessing to others of how God has blessed us. Any comment on the lesson today? I'm trying to save my voice somewhat for the sermon, see how that goes. But anyway, that's stewardship, something we all got to be on the lookout for and be good stewards. All right, we'll take up the next one next week on page 10. That's the one we'll start with next week.